The wind on Shatterbone Peak did not howl, it screamed. It was a blade of ice, slicing through Alara's thin dress, but the cold was nothing compared to the emptiness in Alpha Kale's eyes. She stood back to the abyss, the jagged rocks below hidden by swirling mist. Behind her stood the Red Maw pack, their faces carved from stone. This was not an execution, it was disposal. "Kale, please." Alara's voice was a thread, snapping in the gale. She searched the face of the boy she'd once called brother. "I will vanish. I will walk to the human cities and never speak your name. Just let me go." Kale stepped forward, gravel crunching like bones. He was all sharp angles and frozen beauty. Beside him, Lysandra smiled, a curve of pure malice. "Let you go?" Kale's laugh was a hollow thing. "So you can tell the world the Red Maw pack coddles a soulless human? You are a flaw in our bloodline, Alara, a void where a wolf should be." "She is a sickness," Lysandra purred. "The elders have spoken. Her presence weakens you. If the Black Ridge pack learns you shelter a human pet, they will challenge your rule. They will see the weakness." "I have served this pack," Alara cried, salt tears freezing on her cheeks. "I mended your wounded after the war. I kept your sister safe when the river flooded the lower dens." A shadow, a ghost of the boy he was, flickered in Kale's eyes. Then it was gone, swallowed by ambition. His hand shot out, iron fingers closing on her arm. "And for that service, you receive the mercy of the cliff, not my claws," he hissed. "The Maw River is swift. It is final. You will simply disappear." He dragged her to the edge. The roar of the river was a hungry beast rising from the void. "Kale, look at me!" she screamed, her frail human strength useless. "I am alive!" "Goodbye, Alara." His push was not violent, it was dismissive, like flicking away a crumb. Her world upended, sky and rock twisted into a vortex. The scream of the wind was ripped away, replaced by the deafening thunder of her own heart. Then, impact. The cold was an explosion of shattered glass in her veins. It was not water, it was liquid oblivion, stealing her breath and her hope. The Maw River lived up to its name, a current of furious darkness that snatched her into its heart. She tumbled, a leaf in a storm, the black water pulling her down. So this is it. This is how I end. But in the drowning dark, a spark refused to die. No, the thought was a clear, sharp flame. Not for him, not like this. With a final, desperate surge, she kicked toward a faint glow above. Her hand broke the surface, clawing at air. One gasp, a mouthful of damp mist, and the current slammed her into a half-submerged tree. Agony erupted in her shoulder. Instinct made her cling to the sodden wood. The river carried her, a broken doll, away from Red Maw territory, past the warning stones, and into lands marked on every map with a single skull, the Silent Reaches. The domain of Alpha King Valerius, a name spoken only in whispers, a legend of shadow and tooth. Time lost meaning. The cold was in her bones, a permanent tenant. Just as consciousness fled, the river's fury gentled. Her log bumped, then ground to a halt on a shore of smooth black stones. She retched, coughing up the icy river, her body convulsing. She tried to crawl, but her legs were numb. She collapsed, the stones cold against her cheek. The world faded to gray. The last thing she heard, clearer than the river's sigh, was the deliberate crunch of a footstep on stone. Not an animal. Someone was there. Alara awoke to warmth. A gentle, rough sensation stroked her cheek. She forced her eyes open. Golden light filtered through towering pines. She was on a bed of soft moss, no longer on the stones. Hovering over her was a wolf pup, but pup was not right. He was large, with fur of absolute black and eyes of molten gold. He whined softly and licked her cheek again. "Easy," Alara rasped. She pushed up slowly. The pup sat back, watching with unnerving intelligence. He tilted his head. "Did you find me?" she whispered. The pup blinked. Then the air around him shimmered, fur receded, bones reshaped, and where the wolf sat now knelt a small boy. He had messy black hair and those same golden eyes. He wore simple clothes, now damp. He stared, silent and solemn. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Alara. Where are we?" The boy said nothing. He pointed a small finger deeper into the dark forest. "Are your parents here?" Fear spiked. A pup meant a protector. He shook his head. He crept closer, his small hand reaching out to gently touch the bruise on her arm. His touch was warm. Suddenly, the forest roared. It was not an animal sound. It was a primal eruption of rage that vibrated through the earth. Trees shuddered. Every bird took flight. The boy's eyes widened with fear. For her, he grabbed her hand and pulled, urging her to move. "I can't," Alara gasped, trying to stand. Pain lanced through her ankle. She fell back. The wall of foliage exploded inward. It was not a wolf. It was a force of nature, a beast of shadow and nightmare, taller than a horse, fur of void black. But worse was the pressure, a heavy, suffocating aura of dominance that stole her breath. Alpha King Valerius. The monstrous wolf's lips peeled back from fangs like daggers. Its eyes glowed with hellish red fire. It saw her. A deep growl promised annihilation. It coiled to spring. "No!" Alara's shout was a feeble human sound. The strike never came. A tiny, defiant growl echoed. The boy had placed himself between her and the Alpha King. He was a speck against the mountain of fury, his arms spread wide. He did not flinch as the giant wolf snapped its jaws inches from his face. The beast froze. A silent battle raged. The boy pointed at Alara, then pointed to his own chest. "Mine. She is mine." The red fire in the wolf's eyes flickered, wrestling with a ring of brilliant gold. The beast let out a sharp, frustrated huff. The crushing pressure lessened. Then the shift, swift, terrifying. The wolf was gone. In its place stood a man. Valerius was carved from the same darkness as his land. He stood a giant, bare-chested, a tapestry of silvery scars. His hair was long and black. His face was austerely handsome, but his eyes were a stormy gray, colder than the river. "You," his voice was gravel and frost, "give me one reason I should not end your trespass here." "The river brought me," she whispered, trembling. "I did not mean to cross your border." "The river brings me nothing I do not permit," he stated, taking a step forward. "It has delivered red maw garbage to my door." Alara flinched. Immediately, the boy, Leo, growled, a small, fierce sound that halted the king. Valerius looked at his son. "Lucas, step aside. She carries their stench. She is a spy." Lucas shook his head violently. He turned, grabbed Alara's hand and squeezed. He looked at his father, golden eyes pleading. Valerius ran a hand over his face. "You have been silent for 2 years, not a word since the avalanche, and now you defy me for a stray?" Lucas nodded. Valerius's gaze returned to Alara. "He has claimed you. I do not trust it, but Lucas, he has not reached for another soul since that day." "He saved me," she said, trembling. "He has postponed your fate," he corrected. He looked at her leg. "You cannot walk." "My ankle." With a sound of irritation, Valerius strode forward and scooped her up. It was not gentle, but it was not cruel. He rumbled near her ear, "Mark this. If you are a threat, if you hurt him, your end will make the cliff a mercy." "I am no spy," she said, meeting his cold gaze. "We shall see." He looked at Lucas. "Come." Lucas fell into step beside them. Cradled in the arms of her most dangerous enemy, Alara looked at the boy who had changed everything. She was alive, for now. The obsidian citadel was not a home. It was a declaration carved into the mountain. Valerius carried Alara across a silent courtyard and into a grand hall smelling of stone and old ash. He took her to a room in the east wing and deposited her on a large bed. "You stay here," he commanded. "Martha will tend you. You do not leave, you do not ask questions." The door closed. A key turned. Alara was a prisoner in a gilded cage. The room was opulent, thick rugs, a fireplace, shelves of books, a window with a terrifying view of the distant Red Maw Peaks. Martha arrived, a kind but silent woman. She cleaned Alara's wounds, bound her ankle, and brought food, but to all questions she only shook her head. Days blurred. Alara healed, but her mind churned. She thought of Kale's eyes, the falling feeling. She thought of the shadow beast and the man of winter. And she thought of the silent boy. Was he safe? Was he lonely? On the fourth day, the lock clicked. Valerius filled the doorway. "You can walk." "Yes," Alara said. "Thank you for your healer." "Do not thank me," he said, his gaze heavy. "Thank Lucas. He refuses to eat unless I assure you are safe. He sleeps outside this door." Alara's heart clenched. "Is he all right? May I see him?" "Why?" The word was sharp. "You are human. Wolves break your kind." "I grew up among wolves. I know cruelty, but Lucas showed me kindness. He looks lost." Valerius went still. He leaned in slightly, inhaling. "You have no scent, like a phantom." "I was born without a wolf. That is my crime. That is why I was thrown away." "Only a coward harms the defenseless," Valerius said, his voice low, "and only a fool discards what he does not understand." "I have no value," she whispered. "My son believes you do," Valerius said, his stormy eyes holding hers. "In this citadel, that makes you significant, for now." He turned. "Come, he waits." In the hall, Lucas was curled on the floor. Seeing Alara, his face lit with wordless joy. He scrambled up and hugged her tightly. Alara laughed, stroking his hair. "Hello, little guardian." Valerius watched, his expression unreadable. "He tolerates you. He has bitten every caretaker before you." "Perhaps he just needed someone to listen," Alara said softly. "You will stay," Valerius announced. "You need sanctuary. Your alpha thinks you dead. Stay. Be a companion for Lucas." "You want me to work?" "I want my son to sleep in a bed," Valerius corrected. "You will have protection, but there are laws. First, you do not leave the grounds. Second, you speak to no one of your past. Third," his voice dropped to a deadly whisper, "you never enter the West Wing. That is my domain. If I find you there, not even Lucas will spare you." "I understand." "Good. Do not make me regret this, Alara." He left. Lucas tugged her hand, leading her away. Her safety was an illusion, fragile as ice, dependent on a silent boy and his storm-filled father. The obsidian citadel began to breathe. The scent of herbs from the kitchen drifted into sterile halls. The sound of light footsteps and quiet laughter echoed where only silence had lived. Alara and Lucas were inseparable. In the library, she taught him letters. In the walled garden, she played fetch with a small black wolf pup who would return to her, shift, and grin. The fortress, for the first time, felt less like a tomb. High in his study, Valerius watched. He told himself it was vigilance, but his eyes would follow Alara as she tended to Lucas, her kindness a stark contrast to the stone around them. Her laughter was an irritant, too bright, pricking a hollow place inside him. "She is good for the prince, my king," said Silas, his beta. "He is present, he engages." "She is temporary," Valerius replied, his voice a low growl. "A salve. Once he is stronger, her purpose ends." That night a mountain storm descended. Wind howled, shaking the stones. Lightning flashed, painting the world in stark white and black. Alara was in Lucas's chamber, soothing him. The boy trembled, each thunderclap a terror. She hummed a lullaby, her mother's song. Slowly his breathing eased. He slept. She slipped out. The storm raged, reminding her of the hungry river. Then she heard it, a scream, not from the storm, a raw, torn sound of agony. It came from the west wing. Valerius's law echoed, "Never enter." Another scream, followed by the sound of shattering wood. This was not anger, this was a soul being flayed. Without thinking, she ran towards the heavy oak doors and pushed them open. The west wing was a dark tomb. The air was thick with dust and the scent of metallic distress. She followed the destruction to a set of double doors. The room within was a battlefield. Furniture was splintered, and in the center, on his knees, was Valerius. He was shirtless, clawing at his own chest, fresh wounds bleeding. "Get out!" he roared at the empty air, his voice breaking. "Don't take her, take me." He was hallucinating, trapped in a waking nightmare. Alara should have fled. An alpha in this state was a lethal weapon, but she saw the blood, the utter desperation. "Valerius?" she whispered. His head snapped up, his eyes glowed crimson. He didn't see her, he saw a threat. He snarled and launched. He pinned her against the wall, a hand closing around her throat. One twitch would snap her neck. "You took her," he hissed, voice distorted. "No, it's Alara, Lucas's Alara. Look at me." She reached up, cupping his face. The contact shocked him. He froze. The red in his eyes flickered. He sniffed her desperately. "Alara?" he rasped. He released her as if burned, stumbling back. "Get out. I told you never to come here." "You are hurting yourself," she said, voice shaking. She did not leave. She went to the bathroom, wet a cloth, and returned. "Let me help." "I could have killed you." "But you didn't." She knelt, gently cleaning the blood from his chest. "Everyone ran from me when I needed help. I know what it's like to drown, Valerius, even in a room full of air." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. For the first time in years, the roaring in his mind went silent. "My wife," he whispered, the confession torn from him. "She died in the avalanche. I heard her calling. I couldn't reach her. Every storm, I hear it again." Alara's heart broke for the monster before her. She offered no empty words. She simply tended his wounds, her presence a quiet anchor. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. He opened his eyes, his large hand covering hers on his chest. "You should fear me, Alara." "I do," she admitted, "but I'm staying anyway." The truce shifted into something fragile. Valerius no longer ate alone. He joined Alara and Lucas for silent, tense meals in the great hall. He watched her, an intensity in his stormy eyes that was no longer just suspicion. Peace in the silent reaches, however, was a fleeting thing. 2 weeks after the storm, Silas entered the hall with a grave face. He placed a heavy, gold-embossed envelope on the table. "The invitation for the Luna's ball," Silas announced. "The High Council insists you attend this year, my king. Your continued absence fuels rumors that the Obsidian Pack is weak or leaderless." Valerius's fist clenched. "I despise that circus, a den of snakes and liars." "And," Silas added, glancing at Alara, "the Red Mob Pack will be there. Alpha Kale has been boasting of new alliances. He seeks to expand." Alara dropped her spoon. It clattered loudly. Valerius's eyes snapped to her, seeing the blood drain from her face. Kale is coming? She whispered. Yes, Silas said. He brings his new betrothed, Lysandra. If he sees me, I am not going, Valerius stated flatly, and neither is Alara. You must, my king, Silas urged. To refuse is a snub to the council. There is also the tradition. The Alpha King must bring a companion. Valerius looked at Alara. A dangerous plan formed in his eyes. Fine, I will go, and Alara is coming with me. What? Alara and Silas said together. No, Alara stood, hands shaking. Valerius, you can't. Kale thinks I'm dead. If he sees me, he'll demand me back or finish what he started. Let him try, Valerius said, his voice a lethal purr. You are under my protection. I want him to see you. I want him to see that the nothing he'd discarded now stands beside a king. I have no rank. They will tear me apart. It is a masquerade, Valerius said. A cold smirk touched his lips. Wear a mask. No one will know it is you until we choose to reveal it. You will not go as a nanny. You will go as my guest. Alara felt the walls closing in. The safety of the citadel was about to shatter. The night of the Luna's ball arrived. Martha brought a dress that stole Alara's breath. It was deep emerald silk, the color of a forest at midnight, flowing like water. It was elegant, modest, yet undeniable. She placed a silver filigree mask over her eyes, leaving only her lips visible. A knock came. Enter. Valerius walked in and stopped. He wore a black formal uniform tailored to his powerful frame, a silver wolf's head clasp at his throat. He looked like a king from a forgotten, stern legend. He stared at her, his intensity intense. You look acceptable, he finally said, his voice rough. High praise. He stepped closer, adjusting a stray strand of her hair. His fingers brushed her neck, sending a shiver through her. Stay at my side. If anyone touches you, they lose the hand. If anyone insults you, they lose the tongue. Understood? Yes, my king. He offered his arm. Then let us go shake the wolves from their trees. The Grand Athenaeum was a crystal palace under the stars, filled with the continent's most powerful wolves. When Valerius Blackwood entered with a mysterious woman on his arm, the room hushed. Whispers swirled. Who is she? I smell no wolf. Is she his mate? Valerius was a pillar of cold authority, dismissive of sycophants. He led Alara to the dance floor. His hand on her waist was firm, possessive. As they danced, the world narrowed to his stormy eyes, the solid warmth of him. You are doing well, he murmured. I am terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Then a laugh she knew in her nightmares cut through the music. She stiffened. Valerius felt it instantly. He is here. She turned her head slightly. There, holding court, was Alpha Kale, arrogant, laughing. Lysandra clung to him, a vision in crimson silk. Kale's eyes swept the room, lingering on the dancing couple. He paused. He squinted. He didn't recognize her face, but he recognized her, the way she held herself, the curve of her neck. He began walking towards them. Valerius stopped dancing, turning to face the approach. Kale stopped a few feet away, bowing mockingly. King Blackwood, we are honored the Hermit King graces us with his presence. I enjoy observing lesser creatures in their habitat, Valerius replied dryly. Kale's eyes slid to Alara. And who is this? I smell no pack. I smell nothing. Did you bring a statue to life, Valerius? You are speaking to my companion. Valerius's voice held a warning growl. Companion, Kale laughed. She has the posture of a servant. Remove the mask, darling. Let us see the face. He reached for Alara's mask. Valerius's hand shot out, catching Kale's wrist in a grip that made bones creak. Touch her, Valerius whispered, the air chilling around them, and you leave here without the arm. The music died. Everyone watched. Kale yanked his hand back, face flushing with anger. She is a human. Why does the Alpha King parade a pet? She is no pet, Valerius said, releasing him with a shove. She is the one who saved my son. That makes her worth 100 of you. Lysandra stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning Alara. She saw the small scar on Alara's wrist. Her eyes went wide. She gasped. It cannot be. Alara? The name dropped into the silence like a stone. Cale froze, horror dawning. Alara? Miller? Slowly, Alara reached up and untied her mask. She let it fall. She looked Cale dead in the eye. Hello, Alpha. Surprised to see me dry? The shock in the room was electric. Cale's face paled. You're dead. I watched you fall. I lived, Alara said, her voice clear and steady, and I found a pack that does not murder its own. Cale's shock twisted into fury. You belong to Red Maw. You are pack property, a runaway. I demand her return to face her sentence. She was executed, Valerius said, booming, by your own hand. The river took her. The river runs through my land. What it brings to my shore is mine. She is under my protection. Challenge that claim, Cale. Here, now. A dark, visible aura of power bled from Valerius, making the crystals in the chandeliers tremble. Cale hesitated, his courage wilting before the Alpha King's unleashed might. This isn't over, Cale hissed as he grabbed Lysandra. He stormed out, his pack scrambling behind him. The ball was over for them. We are leaving, Valerius muttered. The air here is poisoned. The silence in the black carriage was not peaceful. It was the quiet before the storm, thick with the unspoken terror of what they had just unleashed. Alara stared out at the dark pines whipping past, the ghost of Cale's enraged face imprinted on the window glass. Valerius sat opposite her, a statue carved from shadow and tension, his stormy eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see. When they reached the obsidian gates of the citadel, the tension did not break, it coiled tighter. Valerius followed her up the winding stairs to her chamber in the east wing, a silent, formidable shadow. He stood in the doorway as she entered, the light from the hall casting his long silhouette across the floor. You were courageous tonight, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the stone floor. Courageous? Alara's laugh was a brittle, breaking sound. She fumbled with the pins in her hair, her hands trembling so violently she dropped one. It skittered across the floor. I was a fool. I exposed us. I stood there and I unmasked myself and I poured oil on a fire. He will come for me now, Valerius. He is too proud, too paranoid to let this stand. I have signed a death warrant for everyone here. Let him come. Valerius stepped into the room and closed the door. The soft click of the latch was deafening. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his presence suddenly overwhelming, filling the room. You called you property. The words were ground out between teeth that seemed suddenly sharper. He spoke of you as if you were a piece of furniture to be reclaimed. It made my wolf want to tear the stars from the sky and hurl them at his miserable kingdom. I am just a human, she whispered, the old, worn-out defense her only shield against the intensity in his eyes. A flaw, a weakness he can exploit. Stop. The word was a command, but his voice cracked on it. He reached out, his large, calloused hand surprisingly gentle as it cupped her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a touch so tender it made her breath catch. Stop saying that. You are the only thing in this fortress of echoes that makes the silence bearable. You are the sunrise in my son's eyes after a long black night. Tonight, you stood before the monster who broke you and you did not bend. You did not even blink. You looked like a queen forged in starlight and iron. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a gilded cage. Valerius, I'm weary, he murmured, leaning forward until his forehead rested against hers. He closed his eyes. It was not a kiss, but something more profound, a sharing of breath, a merging of space, a silent vow whispered from his soul to hers. I am so tired of pretending your presence does not change the very air I breathe, that your laughter does not mend cracks in stone I thought were permanent. In that suspended moment, with his warmth against her and the scent of pine and winter night enveloping her, Alara felt the last of her fear melt away, replaced by a terrifying, wonderful hope. A promise hung in the space between their lips, fragile and bright. A promise shattered into a million screaming pieces. The sound was not of this earth. It was a piercing, ultrasonic howl that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the bones. The perimeter alarm, the citadel itself, was screaming. Valerius grew rigid as granite. His eyes snapped open, the stormy gray swallowed by a blazing feral gold. "He followed us," he snarled, the words guttural, more wolf than man. "He wouldn't dare," Alara breathed, her newfound hope freezing into dread. "Not here, not your stronghold. He is desperate, and desperate men are fools with nothing to lose." He tilted his head, listening to a symphony of chaos only he could hear. Rogues, mercenaries, dozens of them. He's bought himself an army of outcasts. His hands came up to grip her shoulders, his touch firm, anchoring. "Listen to me. Go to Lucas, now. Take him to the vault beneath the old library. You know the one, the door of black iron. Do not open it for anyone. Anyone. Only for me, or for Silas if he gives you the code phrase, shadow and shelter. Do you understand?" The world was narrowing to a tunnel of panic. "What about you?" A terrifying calm settled over him, the calm of a glacier before an avalanche. "I am the Alpha King. I am going to defend my home." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers once more, a fleeting, desperate touch. "Go. Now. Run." Alara ran. The corridors, usually so still, were now alive with distant shouts and the ringing of steel being drawn. Her heart pounded in her throat. She found Lucas already standing in the middle of his room, not in bed, as if he had felt the wrongness in the air. His golden eyes were wide, but he was not crying. He reached for her the moment she appeared. "Quickly, my brave heart," she gasped, seizing his small hand. "To the library, our secret game, the quietest game of all." They flew through the shadowy halls, two ghosts against the stone. The sounds of battle grew louder, snarls that were not animal, shouts of pain, the horrific crash of a gate being breached. Her heart pounded in her throat. They burst into the vast, dark library, the smell of old paper and dust a strange comfort. She found the hidden panel behind the treatise on celestial navigation, her fingers finding the indent. It swung open with a groan. "Inside, quickly," she urged Lucas into the dark stairwell. She followed, pulling the panel closed behind them. Down, down into the cold earth they went, until they faced a door of sheer, riveted black iron. She pushed Lucas inside the vault, the small space lit by a single glowing crystal. A shadow detached itself from behind a stone pillar in the stairwell. A hand, slick with mud and something darker, tangled in her hair and yanked her backward. She screamed, falling hard onto the cold steps, pain lancing through her skull. Cale stood over her, illuminated by the vault's faint light leaking out. He was filthy, his fine clothes torn, his eyes wild with a mad, triumphant glee. "Did you think you could hide from me in the belly of the beast, little ghost? Did you think his shadow was enough to keep you safe?" "Lucas, stay inside!" Alara shrieked, kicking out at Cale's shins. The little boy appeared in the vault doorway, his face a mask of fury. He took a step out. Cale backhanded Alara across the face. The world exploded in white stars. "Say goodbye, Alara. This time I'll make sure the river gets every last piece." He raised a cruel, curved dagger. The metal gleamed in the low light. Suddenly, a black streak launched from the vault doorway. It was not a boy. It was a wolf pup, small but fierce, his jaws clamping onto Cale's dagger arm with a sickening crunch. Cale roared in pain and surprise. "You little vermin!" He shook his arm violently, dislodging the pup, and with a brutal kick sent Lucas, now a boy again, flying across the stairwell. Lucas's head struck the stone wall with a dull, final thud. He slid down and did not move. "No!" Alara's scream was not of fear, but of a primal, earth-shattering fury. She was not a wolf. She had no claws, no fangs, no supernatural strength, but she had a mother's rage. Her hand closed on the only weapon available, a heavy metal-bound ledger that had fallen from a shelf. As Kale turned, snarling towards her motionless boy, she surged to her feet and swung the book with every ounce of strength, every moment of pain, every memory of the cliff's edge. It connected with the side of Kale's head with a solid, satisfying thwack. He staggered, stunned, blood blossoming above his ear. Then the world ended. The outer wall of the stairwell didn't break, it disintegrated. Stone and mortar turned to dust as a force of pure, unleashed vengeance crashed through. Valerius, not as a man, as the embodiment of the mountain's wrath. The giant black wolf filled the space, his golden eyes incandescent with a fury so absolute it stole the air from the room. He saw Alara bleeding on the steps. He saw Lucas, limp and still.
The sound that tore from the beast's throat was the sound of universes collapsing. He moved faster than sight, jaws that could crush bone closed on Kale's shoulder, not to kill, but to possess. He lifted the Red Maw Alpha like a rag doll and used his own momentum to slam him into the opposite wall with such force the stones cracked. Kale's scream was a brief, wet gurgle. Valerius did not stop. He was a storm of teeth and fury, a controlled, brutal dismantling of a threat. Bones snapped, the dagger clattered away. When he finally stepped back, Kale was a broken, whimpering heap on the floor, alive, but utterly, irrevocably defeated. Then the wolf was gone. Valerius fell to his knees beside his son, his human hands trembling as they cradled Lucas's face. "Lucas, my boy, look at me." A groan, a flutter of dark lashes. Lucas's golden eyes opened, dazed. They searched, found Alara, and focused. His lips, pale and cracked, parted. A sound emerged, hoarse from disuse, fragile as a cobweb, but utterly clear. "Mama," the first word in 2 years. Valerius froze. A single, silver tear tracked through the grime and blood on his cheek. He looked from his son's face to Alara's, his stormy eyes wide with an awe so profound it was like a physical blow. "He spoke," Valerius whispered, the Alpha King's voice breaking. "He called you Mama." Alara crawled over the rubble, ignoring the pain, and wrapped her arms around them both, the mighty king brought to his knees, and the prince who had found his voice. She held them as the dust settled around them, in the ruins of their sanctuary. "I'm here," she sobbed into Valerius's shoulder, her other hand stroking Lucas's hair. "We're all here. We're safe." The siege was over. The real healing was just beginning. A clean, sharp dawn broke over the obsidian courtyard, washing the battle-scarred grounds in pale gold light. The night's violence was being erased, broken gates hauled away, blood scrubbed from stone, the wounded tended in a hushed infirmary. The invaders were gone, the rogue mercenaries scattered to the winds, their bought loyalty evaporating with their defeat. In the deepest cell, carved into the mountain's heart, Kale of the Red Maw existed. He was alive, but the alpha fire that had once burned in him was extinguished, smothered by shame and a defeat so total it had crippled his very spirit. His pack was no more, its lands and loyal wolves absorbed into the obsidian territory under Silas's firm, just stewardship. In the sunlit infirmary, Alara sat propped against a mountain of pillows, her face bandaged, her ankle re-wrapped. The physical pain was a dull throb compared to the radiant, fragile joy glowing in her chest. On a stool pulled right up to her bedside sat Lucas, a cup of water held in 2 serious hands. A faint bruise bloomed on his temple, but his eyes were clear and bright. "Your papa says you must drink and rest," Lucas said, his voice still soft, still hesitating over the unfamiliar shapes of words, but each syllable was a precious bell to Alara's ears. Your papa, Alara said, taking the cup with a smile that hurt her bruised cheek, is a very wise man, and so is the boy who listens to him. Lucas beamed, a sunburst of pure happiness. The door opened and Valerius filled the frame. He had washed away the grime of battle, but weariness was etched into the lines around his eyes, a weariness of the soul. Yet the perpetual storm in his gaze had settled into a deep, calm sea. Lucas, Valerius said, his voice gentle, Martha has honey cakes in the kitchen. Would you guard them for us? Make sure none go missing? Lucas nodded solemnly, understanding a dismissal. He slipped off the stool, gave Alara's hand a quick squeeze, and padded out, closing the door quietly behind him. Valerius moved to the vacated stool. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his gaze tracing the bandage on her face, the sling on her arm. The healers say you will be well. Bruises and sprains, nothing lasting. And Kale? Asked Alara, the name tasting of ash. Alive, Valerius said, the word flat and final. Death would be a pardon he does not deserve. His power is broken, his pride is pulp. He will live out his days in the dark, with only the memory of his failure and the sound of a human girl's courage for company. His pack is dissolved. The innocent are welcome here. The guilty face our justice. He reached out and took her good hand, his own warm and steady around her fingers. But that is not what I came to say. The fate of tyrants is administrative. What I have to ask you is everything. He released her hand and reached into the inner pocket of his tunic. He pulled out a small, plain box of dark polished wood, worn smooth with age. He opened it with a soft click. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a pendant. It was a teardrop of pure obsidian, glassy and deep, but shot through its very center was a single, brilliant vein of raw gold. It hung from a delicate, almost impossibly fine silver chain. Last night, Valerius began, his voice low and so full of sincerity it vibrated in the quiet room. My son, who had been silent for 2 long years, called you Mama. In the way of our kind, a pup's heart is the truest compass. He did not just speak a word, he made a claim. He claimed you as his mother, his family, his heart, long before I had the right or the courage to even dream of claiming you for my own. He lifted the pendant from the box. The obsidian drank the light, but the gold vein caught the sun and glowed. You fell into my river, he said, his eyes holding hers, refusing to let her look away. You washed up on my shore, half dead, with nothing but a spirit that refused to break. Fate tried to drown you, Alara, but it only succeeded in delivering you to us, to him, to me. He leaned forward, the chain dangling from his fingers. I do not care that you have no wolf. I have never cared. You have the heart of a queen. You have the soul of a protector. You have a strength that does not come from tooth and claw, but from something far more powerful, love and an unbreakable will. With gentle hands, he fastened the chain around her neck. The cool stone came to rest just above her heart, the gold vein a secret warmth against her skin. Alara Miller, Valerius whispered, his forehead coming to rest against hers once more, their shared breath mingling. Will you stay? Not as a guest, not as a companion, not as the prince's caretaker. Will you stay as my wife, as my Luna, as Lucas's mother, in every way that matters? Will you be the heart of this family and the guiding soul of this pack? Tears streamed down Alara's face, hot and unchecked, washing over the bandages. She looked into the eyes of the man who had been her captor, her protector, her storm, and now her shelter. She looked at the door, beyond which her brave, beautiful, talking boy was guarding honey cakes. She felt the weight of the obsidian pendant, a stone born of fire and pressure, now holding a vein of precious gold, just like her own life. Her voice, when it came, was choked with emotion, but it was clear and it was certain. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, Valerius, I will stay. I will be your wife. I will be his mother. I will be your Luna. My answer is yes. A shuddering breath escaped him, as if he had been holding it for a century. He did not kiss her, he simply wrapped his arms around her with infinite care, burying his face in her hair, holding her as if she were the most precious, most fragile, most powerful thing he had ever been given. And in that quiet, sunlit room, with the promise of a future gleaming at her throat, Alara knew that after the cliff, after the river, after the siege, she had finally been found.
The great hall of the obsidian citadel had never seen such a gathering. It was a sea of powerful, wary faces, alphas and lunas from every major pack across the continent, their finest furs and silks a riot of color against the austere black stone. The air hummed with a low, tense curiosity. They had come to witness the impossible, the coronation of a human as Luna to the most formidable Alpha King in living memory. A hush fell as the great doors swung open. Alara did not enter in flowing silks or sparkling jewels. She walked in a gown of deep forest green velvet, the color of the pine-clad mountains that sheltered them. It was strong, practical, beautiful in its simplicity, with sleeves that tapered to her wrists and a hem that brushed the floor. At her throat, the obsidian pendant with its vein of gold caught the torchlight, a stark, elegant statement. Her hair was braided in a crown, unadorned today. On her right side stood Valerius, a pillar of solemn strength in his formal black attire, the silver wolf's head clasp at his throat gleaming. On her left, his small hand firmly tucked in hers, was Lucas. The young prince stood straight, his golden eyes scanning the crowd with a gravity beyond his years, a tiny protector in a hall of giants. They walked the long aisle together, a united front. The silence was so complete Alara could hear the soft brush of her gown on stone, the steady rhythm of her own heart. She felt the weight of hundreds of stares, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, on the simple dais where Silas waited. They reached the steps. Valerius gave her hand one final reassuring squeeze before releasing it to stand beside Silas. Alara ascended alone, with Lucas resolutely climbing each step beside her, refusing to let go. They turned to face the assembly. Silas, his voice aged and resonant, echoed in the vaulted space. "We gather under the ancient laws of pack and kinship. Who stands for this woman, Alara Miller, once of the Red Maw? Who claims her as pack? Who names her as heart? Who binds her as kin?" Valerius took a single decisive step forward. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried to the farthest corner, clear and absolute, leaving no room for doubt or challenge. "I, Valerius, Alpha King of the Obsidian Pack, claim her." A murmur rippled through the crowd, expected, but not enough. Then a small figure stepped forward. Lucas let go of Alara's hand and stood squarely before the assembly. He lifted his chin, his young voice ringing out, pure and bell-like in the vast hall. "I, Lucas, claim her." He paused, looking up at Alara, and his face broke into a smile of utter devotion. He said for all the wolves of the world to hear, "She is my mama." The effect was instantaneous and profound. The murmured skepticism died, the hostile glances softened into surprise, then into a dawning respect. In Wolflaw, the claim of a pup, especially a royal heir who had chosen his mother, carried a weight that rivaled an alpha's decree. It was instinctual, pure, and undeniable. A wave of acceptance, almost a physical force, rolled through the hall. Heads nodded, stances relaxed. Silas smiled, a rare sight. "The claim is made and witnessed. By the alpha's vow and the pup's heart, she is pack." Valerius turned to Alara. In his hands he held not a heavy crown of gold, but a circlet of woven silver, delicate as frost. Twined within it were tiny polished oak leaves for strength and resilience, and chips of raw obsidian for protection and the depths of their home. It was a crown for a Luna of the mountains. "My king," Silas prompted. Valerius lifted the circlet. "Alara," he said, his voice now for her alone, though the whole world listened. "You came to us from the storm and the river. You brought light to our shadows and a voice to our silence. With this, I do not place a burden upon you, but I recognize the strength you already carry." Gently, he settled the silver circlet upon her brow. It was cool and it was light. "I give you Alara, my Luna, my heart, my equal in all things." As the circlet touched her skin, a unified sound rose from the throats of every wolf in the hall. It was not a howl of challenge, but a howl of allegiance, a deep, resonant, harmonious note that shook the very foundations of the citadel. It was the sound of a pack accepting its heart. Alara stood, the silver cool on her brow, the obsidian warm at her throat, Lucas's hand finding hers again. She looked out at the sea of faces, no longer seeing judges, but seeing her pack. The last cold shadow of the cliff's edge melted away under the warmth of that collective howl. The girl who was thrown away was not just saved, she was chosen, she was honored, she was home. 5 summers later, the obsidian citadel sang. The silence that had once been its defining characteristic was now a tapestry woven with the vibrant threads of life. The corridors echoed with the swift footsteps of children at play. The great hall hummed with the lively debates of a council that now included voices from the integrated Red Maw families. And the library was often filled with the sound of a patient voice teaching letters, not just to one prince, but to a small class of pack children. On a wide, sun-drenched balcony that had been Alara's own request, a place to feel the sun and see the sky, she stood, leaning against the carved rail. The valley below was no longer a misty barrier, but a lush, protected territory where wolves and humans from the annexed lands worked together in peace. Warmth enveloped her from behind as strong arms circled her waist. Valerius rested his chin on the top of her head, a now familiar gesture of quiet contentment. "You are thinking of the cliff," he murmured, his voice a soft vibration against her hair. He knew the paths of her heart as well as his own. She leaned back into his solid embrace. "Not with fear," she said, her gaze soft on the horizon where the Red Maw peaks were just visible. "Not anymore, with a strange gratitude. For if I had not fallen, I would never have been found by the river, and if the river had not been so fierce, it would not have carried me all the way to your shore. I would never have found you, or him." Below them, in the courtyard dappled with afternoon sun, the future of the obsidian pack was at play. Lucas, now a tall, confident boy of 10, was kneeling on the grass. Before him, wobbling on unsteady legs, was a little girl of 3 with a wild mop of silver blonde hair and eyes the exact stormy gray of her father. Her name was Lyra. "Focus, little moon," Lucas said, his voice gentle and encouraging, so unlike the silent child he had been. "Think of the wind in the trees. Think of running." Lyra scrunched her face in fierce concentration. There was a shimmer in the air around her, a soft, silvery glow. Then, with a happy yip, she was gone, and in her place stood a perfect, tiny wolf pup with fur the color of moonlight and eager blue eyes. She stumbled, then righted herself, tail wagging furiously. Lucas laughed, a sound of pure, free joy. "You did it!" He shifted seamlessly himself, becoming a sleek, strong black wolf pup, though larger now. He nudged his sister playfully, and the two of them tumbled together in a whirl of black and silver fur. "He has your courage," Valerius said, pride swelling his voice as he watched his children. "And his father's steadfast strength," Alara replied, smiling. She touched the obsidian pendant at her throat, a constant, comforting weight. "And Lyra, she has your stormy eyes and a spirit as wild and bright as a shooting star." They watched in comfortable silence as Lucas shifted back, scooping up his wriggling sister pup and settling her in his lap, speaking to her in low, reassuring tones. The scene was one of perfect, peaceful normalcy, a normality Alara had once believed was forever beyond her reach. The girl who had been thrown from the cliff had not just been rescued, she had become the architect of a new legacy. The Obsidian Pack was no longer just feared, it was respected for its strength and admired for its unity. It was a dynasty built not on fear and tyranny, but on the unshakable pillars of loyalty, chosen family, and a love that had proven stronger than any river, any cliff, any army. The cliff was a faded memory, a scar that had healed into a mark of survival. The river was not a death sentence, but the winding path that had led her home. And here, on this sun-warmed balcony, wrapped in the arms of her king, watching the joyful future play at their feet, Ilara knew with absolute certainty that her story was no longer one of being thrown away. It was a story of being found, of being chosen, of building a home not from stone and fear, but from love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond of a family that had chosen each other against all odds. She was Alara, she was Luna, she was Mama, and she was, finally and forever, home.